Hello.
Hello, Hans. Hello.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon for you.
Yes, we are afternoon here. Thank you so much, Hans, for your session this afternoon. We are waiting for about 2 or 3 minutes, waiting for some friends trying to join our lecture also.
Hello.
Yes. Okay. We are hearing you very good here, and I think this you can start in 2 minutes right now. And we try also contact with our colleagues from many hospitals in Indonesia who joining this webinar, and it is a very nice time for us to be what's it, a very long distance lecture, I think. But I will sit everything. Okay.
Yes, indeed. It's a very long distance connection.
Yes, I know very well. Before the lecture, I would like to ask you about the meeting for Seoul. You will be there also, I think, in June.
Okay.
Okay. I think you can start your lecture. It's about 40 minutes for you, and then after that could be any discussion from the participant of this meeting. And after that also we will make this discussion session in a file so that the participant can download it and then open and join this lecture at the next time. So I think it will be the same for us, for me. Okay, guys, I think this the time is yours, friends.
Okay. You can see my screen, my computer screen, my
Yes.
PowerPoint files also.
Yes, very clear.
Okay. So I was asked, when I'm talking too quickly for the connection, please let me know that.
Okay.
So they asked me, or you asked me to talk about the role of the hospital blood bank to the patient safety, but then you can automatically, you have, when something is going on, you will see that hospital blood bank, what's that? And so for me, you have a hospital transfusion service and you have a blood bank, which could be the Red Cross or could be a hospital blood bank or whatever you want. But I think there are two different things, a blood bank and a transfusion service, because the transfusion service is the direct connection with the patient and the blood bank is the direct connection with the donor. So I prefer, in talking about the role of the hospital transfusion service in the patient safety. So I would like to start in a case. You have a young woman, she is 24 years old, and she gave birth to her child, and she has fluxus. And she's losing 2.5 liters of blood just after the birth of her child. So what should you do? You should give blood. But what you don't want is that you give the blood and this young woman will die because of the blood transfusion. So there is patient safety need. You don't want that. You want 70, 80 years later, you want a laughing patient still alive. So there are some measures needed. And then you have to understand that there are side effects of this blood transfusion, and you want to avoid that. About side effects of blood transfusion, you will have, and you will see immunologic reactions, and you will see non-immunologic reactions. So, and both of them can be acute during the transfusion, within very few hours after the transfusion, but also delayed. Think of an anti-kit can be there after 10 to 14 days. But also think of the non-immunologic reactions. Think of an HIV infection, which can appear many months after the transfusion. So this could be a problem. From looking at hemovigilance systems, from the European hemovigilance and the US hemovigilance systems, we know that we, as being physicians, or laboratory personnel, or even nurses, are a lot of causes of the origin of the side effects. Whether this is immunologic or this is in microorganisms. So we need to take care because these errors can appear at the nursing unit already by taking the wrong tube from the wrong patient or making a mislabeling of these tubes. Also in the laboratory, so in the transfusion service, you can make mistakes because switching tubes. And then finally, you have a nurse who's giving the transfusion to the wrong patient. This could appear, this is very easily happening, so we need to have checks. So when we have the role of a hospital blood bank to the patient safety, and we have nursing units, what's the connection with this? And to my opinion, there is a very important connection for the transfusion service and a very important role for the transfusion service in also at nursing unit levels. So what's this role? This could be, and you see this in the Western world and also in the United States, you see that this role is laid from the laboratory into the hospital transfusion committee. So, and this committee is responsible for all transfusion practices within the hospital. Who are in it? So this is the head of the laboratory. This is the hematologist, one of the hematologists, one of the surgeons, one of the obstetricians, sometimes the pharmacist, sometimes always one or two nurses, one or two laboratories. So together with them, you are responsible for the transfusion practice within your hospital. So, when you look at your patient, this woman, 24-year-old, will give birth and having a fluxus. Who's involved in that? You will see there is a doctor. He or she is taking care of the patient. Then you have the nurse taking your tubes, and you have the tube transported to the hospital, to the blood transfusion service. The blood transfusion service is checking whether there is the unit available. And when this is not available, you need to have contact with your donors or with the international or regional blood transfusion, the blood bank. Then when you have your complete unit, you have your unit to be transported to the ward where the patient is laying. You have again the nurse giving the transfusion and then coming back to the patient. So in this complete chain of blood transfusion, in fact, you have a role as a hospital transfusion committee in education of the physicians when to transfuse. When I was a resident, I was doing obstetricians or obstetrics, and one of my colleagues ordered a transfusion after cesarean section, and the patient was still having a hemoglobin level of 14 grams per deciliter. Why should you give them blood transfusion? Why? So there need to be education also for physicians in when to transfuse and what blood components to be transfused. Also, there need to be education for nurses, laboratory co-workers, not only initial training of these people, but also a continuous training, so a re-education after a year or after a few years. So furthermore, we have all kinds of procedures. You can make even guidelines or SOPs, working procedures, made from this transfusion committee. And then, of course, a very important role of this hospital transfusion committee is the check or the audit how everything is working for the adaptation or whatever you want from the guideline or the SOP, or in fact go back in education. So this is a very important role for the initiative of the hospital transfusion service. Another thing is the side effects, and especially in these immunologic origin, which we fear very. So, what can cause these immunologic reactions, then especially in the red cells? This is antibodies from the patient directed against the donor blood you're giving. Usually these are the anti-red blood cell antibodies directed against red blood cell antigens. So that here in these blood groups. But occasionally what you need and what we fear, especially in children or in massive blood transfusions, is the anti-A and anti-B. So we all think that the O donor is the universal donor, but sometimes there are in the literature that of patients described due to the anti-A level or the not specifically the anti-B, but this is rare. But in children there is a very small total blood volume, so this is much more feared. Furthermore, what we should think of is the white blood cells. We can have antibodies in patients against HLA types in the donor. For red cells, this is not important because there is almost no HLA on the red cell, but for platelets, this is very important. And so, what we'll do is you will see in these cases is that the platelet you transfuse is gone almost immediately. After an hour, you don't see any platelets. And what we are afraid of always is the patient getting an enormous dyspnea after the transfusion, within 6 hours. This could be, of course, the TACO, the transfusion-associated cardiac overload, but it could also be the HLA or the HNA, so the neutrophil antibodies, in the patient directed, or in the donor directed against antigens in the patient, causing TRALI, the transfusion-related acute lung injury. Also, in patients, in stem cell patients, or patients with a very low or absent immunity, you fear the graft versus host disease. So, the white cell remaining in blood components from the donor is attacking the patient as being not compatible. You should know that transfusion-associated graft versus host disease cannot be treated and is usually fatal for the patient. And already mentioned, also platelets can be harmed by antibodies in the patient. But don't forget your plasma. Antibodies in the patient, anti-IgA, can react to the plasma, to the IgA donor. You will see problems already in the first seconds of transfusion. But also, antibodies in your donor can harm your patient. What very rare, but what has been described is an allergic reaction to peanuts, for example. So when the donor has eaten peanuts just prior to the donation, you can have a reaction, an anaphylactic reaction in your patient, causing even death of your patient. So we try to avoid this, of course. Especially in the immunologic reactions of the red cell, we have an important role in our laboratory. We should check our patient donor compatibility in the blood transfusion. So we do this by pre-transfusion tests. And as you know, there is a lot of history already in blood transfusion, already for ages. And especially which is important for this history, in this history is Mr. Lenois described agglutination of blood components. And of course, a few years later, Karl Landsteiner saw the AB blood groups in himself and in his colleagues. Later, he discovered the Landsteiner-Wiener blood groups, which is rather similar to the rhesus T or the rhesus blood groups. So what did Landsteiner see in 1901? He saw the A and the B. In some, he mixed blood from himself and from his colleagues with others in the tubes in the laboratory. And what he did notice is that sometimes you have agglutination, what you can see in this second part, and sometimes you don't see an agglutination. So what you see here. And this is from the original publication from Landsteiner, and you see that he had in the serum of himself and his colleagues, he mixed it with red cells from himself and colleagues, and in some ways he did notice an agglutination, and sometimes he did not see. So, based on this, he described in his articles that there must be at least two blood groups, the A blood group and the B blood group. Later on, they saw it was a B blood group and O blood group, or we call this Dutch language, the Blabla language, we call it the zero blood, because there is an anti-A and anti-B, no A and no B blood. So what you see, in fact, is there is an antigen of sugars on the surface of the red cells. And when there is blood added with antigens which are not fitting to, or blood added, serum added with antibodies not directed against the antigen, you don't see an agglutination. This can be an IgM or an IgG, by the way. When you have, on the other hand, you have red blood cells with antigen and antibodies fitting to this antigen. So, type A, you mix it with an anti-A, you will see this agglutination. And you will see these kind of patterns under your microscope or in your tubes. So based on this, we know now we have an A blood group, B blood group, A with an anti-B, B with an anti-A, O with an anti-A and anti-B, and an AB with no anti-A.